Can we start with your full name, please?
Alan Cyril Wallace.
And where and when were you born?
I was born in Springfield, Ohio, August the 4th, 1925.
So how old are you today?
93.
And which branch of the military did you serve with?
I was in the Navy.
And what was your rank in the Navy?
I was a second-class steward in the Cooks and Stewards branch.
And what was your responsibilities?
Preparing for the officers, the meals, setting. My duties were just taking care of all the commissary and stuff like that.
Okay. And what years did you serve from and until?
From 1943 to 1946.
And aboard which ships did you serve?
I was on the Selfridge, USS Selfridge destroyer. And then when I got to New York, I happened to have to go into the hospital, so I missed my ship and I had to go aboard another ship, which was the BFW Reed destroyer escort.
And what year was that?
That was in 1944.
Okay. And can I ask what you ended up in the hospital for?
Kidney stones.
Oh, okay. Not very pleasant, I would imagine.
No.
All right. So can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and growing up through the Great Depression?
Yeah. Well, in 1927, we moved to the farm. My father had bought a farm. He couldn't buy it, so a white judge had to buy it for him and then sell it to him. And we had a rough time because they didn't want us in the neighborhood. They didn't want us out on the farm next to them, and they did everything dirty to us they could possibly do to keep us from surviving. They had the sheriffs coming out saying we were bootleggers. They would shoot our hogs and our stock. And my father had to finally stand his ground and say, hey, you're trespassing on private property. And so they eventually stopped.
And these are just your neighbors and people in the community?
Yeah, neighbors would say everything they could do just to get us out of there. They didn't want us out there. And the judge came out and finally he bought a house at the end of our lane. Well, not a house. It was an old abandoned schoolhouse. And he bought it and made a home out of it. And he came out every weekend just to check on us to be sure we were okay. So it was a pretty rough time. And then, we had our hogs and our chickens and everything. I milked cows by hand. We basically had a pretty good life. It was a prejudiced life, but it was we still had a good life. My father always made us hold our head high and just don't let anybody tell you can't, because you can. And he was an uneducated man, but he did things in a crude way, but they worked.
And you had both your parents growing up?
Yes, I had both my parents growing up, and we had a great family life. There was 8 children. I was the 7th child. We just had a loving family. We argued and fought and all that, but we were always loved each other. And so I guess, in a sense, it was pretty rough because we're going to school. They didn't want us in the school. The other schools would forfeit if my brother and I played football or basketball or anything, the other school would forfeit if we played. And so it was a sad time. And as I grew up, we still had to, my father used to say, son, you just have to suck it up and accept what is, or tolerate what is. Don't accept it, but tolerate what is.
And, I mean, being so young, did you understand what was happening and why it was happening?
No, all we knew was that my father always, and my mother both, they always preached don't hate. Love people, don't hate people. And no matter what is done to you, and they used to preach to us when they persecuted God, but he never hated them. Jesus, rather.
And were there other minority families living amongst you?
No, our family was the only one in that area. And so we went to an all-white school. And I was both least likely to succeed. When I was in the 5th grade, I was held back because the mayor of the town didn't want me in the same class as his son. So they held me back that year. And then when we had a school reunion back in 1972, I think it was, 72 or 73, the teacher that I had then, she lived in North Carolina. I'm North Dakota. And she said I had to come. And she was the old lady. But she said, I had to come because I heard you were going to be here. She said, I want to see how you turned out. She said, you always made that statement. When someone said you couldn't, you always said, yes, I can. And so I said, I know why you failed me. And she says, that was then, this is now. And so she says, back then, I would lose my job if I didn't do what I was told. And she said, I needed my job.
So did you have any friends in your school?
Oh yeah, they were all friends when we were one-on-one. But when the group come around, they would turn away from you. And we had fights. I mean, people call you the name that I didn't like, and we'd have fights, but we would still pick each other on the baseball team. And the mayor's son, whose name was the same as mine, we used to fight all the time because we always argued over our name. He spelled his way one way and I spelled mine the other. And I remember one time his father came to the school. Well, his son and I was drinking water out of the well where you put your hand under the spigot on the pump and water would spout up. And that's what we would drink. Well, he pushed my head down and busted my lip and it was bleeding. And I beat him up and ran him off the school ground. And so his father came to the school the next day and made an issue of it in front of everybody. And he says, if you, well, excuse the expression, but he said, if you niggers don't let my son alone, I'm going to come in and wring all of your necks and string you up. And so anyway, as soon as his father left, now this is in front of the class, he said all this. As soon as his father left, he says, yeah, my daddy's going to get a bunch of you nigger and wring your necks. Well, what happened then was I beat him up and ran him off the school ground. I said, that's all right, my family's bigger than yours. We'll wring your necks. And that's the year I was held back.
What age was this for you?
Well, I was in the 5th grade, so I guess I was about 11 or 12.
Now you and your siblings, you mentioned you guys were pretty tight knit family.
Oh yes, we were very tight.
So what would you guys do for fun, for entertainment?
Played croquet. Um, played played football and everything out in our fields, and we always played horseshoes and things like that. We played. We did a lot of things, but we always were close to each other. We defended each other. Even though we may have fought, we still defended each other.
It's tough to break that family bond.
Oh, yes. And it was that way all the way through life. And when I was, well, I'll go back to when I was about 3 years old, I was climbing a picket fence. My mother kept telling me, don't do that because you'll fall. And I was climbing it anyway. And I fell and got my feet were caught in the spigots and broke both my legs. So I was in cast for a long time and in the hospital. But it didn't just stop me from doing what I wanted to do. But it was just little things like that. And when we milked our cows, the milkman would not come down to pick it up. We had to carry it to the end of the lane. So my brother and I had to carry a 5-gallon can in each hand to carry it up for the truck to pick it up to deliver.
So, did your father have a job besides?
Yes, my father worked in the steel mill. He poured hot steel during the night, and then he ran the farm during the day. And he was a worker, a hard worker. And my mother didn't work. She was there, helped on the farm. My older brothers, they worked in the fields. And as my younger brother, one that he was older, he was 2 years older than me. He and I were real tight because we worked together at almost everywhere we went. We worked together. They always hired us because they knew we were hard workers. And for $1.10 a day, and a day was from dark to dark. And my father would give us 50. My father would collect and give us 50 cents a week, and use the rest for raising a family of 8.
A lot of mouths to feed.
And it was, as I say, but we didn't need any more money than that because even when we got in our teens and we were driving, we used tractor gas. My neighbor had a 1939 LaSalle that I drove all the time because he says I'm not using it, and it was a brand new car. So he says, because we worked on his farm. He said my brother, I made him tired, and he was riding a tractor, and we'd be working baling hay. And they would have big dinners. All the farmers, the wives would get together and cook the dinners, and then we had the big lunches.
So did that relationship with your neighbors eventually get better?
Well, there were some of the neighbors, they were just nice people. Well, all of them, even the woman that would turn us in mostly, she was a Swiss lady. She would turn us in mostly, her sons and daughters, we got along fine. And they would sneak down and play with us. She didn't want them playing with us, but they'd sneak down to the farm and play. So as I say, if parents would leave the children alone, there would never be prejudice born in them. But we have so many people who preach hate to their children, and they live up that way. They live their life that way. So.
And did you finish school? Did you graduate?
That's a big story. I was in high school in the 11th grade, and a lady we called Miss Laura, I won't name the name of the school, but we called her, she was the prettiest lady in a girl in the school. But she was the daughter of a man who took care of our cars and trucks and tractors and everything. And she and I were so close that we'd go to movies together, but we couldn't sit together. So she'd sit in the white section, I had to sit in the colored section. So we'd sit next to each other regardless. And now the reason what I'm saying all that for is to get to where the question you asked me. We were in school. She was bent over in her locker, and I used a neckerchief, and I snapped her while she was bent over with it. And he saw me. He came down, and he grabbed me. He tore my collar. He grabbed me so hard and bruised my neck. I said, Mr. Flory, what is this all about? And he says, I'm going to teach you niggers not to get fresh with our white girls. And she started crying because she didn't want me in trouble. And he said, you go on in the study hall. That's what he told her. And so he said, I want you to come up to my office. I said, boy, I'll be up there to talk. We'll talk about this. He said, no, I want right now. I'm going to beat you within an inch of your life. I says, Mr. Flory, you're not going to beat me. We have nothing to talk about. I'm going into the study hall and study. I went into the study hall and sat down with her, because we had double desks, and sat down beside her, and we were studying, and he came in there and had this board, and he slammed it on the desk up front. He said, come up here in the front, Alan Wallace. I want to beat you within an inch of your life for getting fresh with our white girls. And I was, really upset because he was doing this in front of everybody. And I said, Mr. Flory, I will go to your office with you and we'll talk about this. No, I'm going to make an example of you right here in front of the class. And I said, Mr. Flory, no, you're not. I said, no, we can't talk. I'm going back to my seat. So he kept on saying, no, you're going to come up here and you're going to bend over that desk and I'm going to whip you. He didn't say whip you, I'm going to beat you. And I said, finally, I was starting to get mad. I was trying to keep my cool, but I couldn't. I finally started getting mad, and I said, Mr. Flory, you're not man enough to beat me. And he said, yes, I am. And I says, what makes you think that? And he said, because my boys are football players, and I beat them. And I said, well, I'm still saying you're not man enough to beat me. And he took the board and swung at me, and he missed me, and I beat him up. But when he did take the board and hit me on the right around the groin area, he hit me so hard it chipped my hip bone. I took the board away from him and almost hit him with it, but instead I threw the board away and I beat him up. Yeah. So they put me in juvenile. Well, finally, the judge that bought the farm for my father was the judge. And he said, a Wallace? It is not a Wallace. And I said, yes, I did, Your Honor, and I'll do it again. And they had to put me in the juvenile. And I was in there for about 7 days, and they fed me oatmeal 3 times a day. And so finally I called my father and I showed him my private areas. And it was all, I was black and blue all around my waist. And the judge came down to see it, and they put me in the hospital to take care of it. And I was right out of there. But they let him finish the school, and I wouldn't go back because I knew I would probably do something unnecessary. So I wouldn't go back to school. And I was in the 11th grade. So anyway, I left, and then when the war broke out, I had to go into service and everything. And I went back and got my GED when I came out of service. But that's the only reason I didn't have my graduation. But the kids always thought that I should be in that class. But anyway, while I was in service, he saw me. He came into the city market where my mother and father had stands. And he saw me in my uniform. He came up to shake my hand. I turned my back on him. And my mother said, "Son, that isn't Christian." I said, "Mom, I don't like that man." She said, "Son, I never taught you that way. That isn't Christian." And I wouldn't defy my mother, so I reached back and I shook his hand, kind of a wet noodle shake. And he looked at me, he said, "You know, I've made some mistakes in life, but right now I feel like I'm shaking the hand of a real man." And a bubble lit up in my head and made me say, I beat this man and didn't know it. I mean, mentally I had beaten him. And from that day on, my life changed. I was able to turn my cheek and someone could say almost anything and I'd walk away from it. But that's the reason I didn't have my graduation. And then when 1990, I think it was, or they had a class reunion, or school, class reunion, and they wanted me to be there because they knew I should have graduated in that class. And I wouldn't go up until the 50th anniversary. And I finally went. And they said they didn't realize they were prejudiced. And I said,
the kids?
The kids. They said, that we weren't prejudiced. I said, yes, you were. I said, you were friendly with me one-on-one, but as soon as your friends come, you turned away. And they said they didn't realize that. And they said, because we wonder why you never came to the reunions, because we always thought you belonged in our class.
So what made you decide to finally attend the reunion?
They kept sending me letters. You've got to come. We want to see you. And so I said, well, I decided I'd go. So, and I went, and it was nice. Well, it was kind of comical too, because they were covering up their signs, and they said, "I bet you can't guess who I am. I bet you can." I said, "Well, look, I don't know any of you old people. The only reason you recognize me because I got a California tan." And so and that's the way it went. But the reunion was great. I really enjoyed it. I have a whole picture of it if you'd like to see that.
That'd be interesting to see.
So I say, I had a good life, even though we couldn't participate in these sports. We could play in school, but we couldn't play with the other schools when they had tournaments. And I couldn't belong to the 4-H club, so a lot of things I couldn't do because a person of color couldn't get into the 4-H back then. So there's just so many things that have gone on in my life.
Now, was there a frustration or an anger or anything that would build up inside because you kept getting turned away or not allowed or something?
I didn't have hate for the kids. I just always wondered how they were, and I started calling them after the reunion, and we talked, and a lot of us talked, and they always made that remark that you were always so challenging, and it was just that I felt like I lost the best part of my life with all the prejudices.
Your childhood.
My childhood life, yeah.
Yeah, in regards to that, I mean, I can't imagine, what you had went through, but I'm thinking if I was told that I couldn't do this and was held back in school because of, those same reasons that you explained, that everybody has a breaking point.
Right. But I didn't after my meeting.
But before that, did you feel like you just needed to?
Oh, I wanted to, but I just, my father always preached to us, he says, don't start anything because you never win.
So you had good guidance from your parents in that regard.
Oh, yes. My parents were very strict. Of course, I was strict with my children. But they were very strict, but they were loving.
And do you know your parents' heritage and your family lineage?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I grandmothers and grandfathers. Well, I didn't meet my grandmother on my mother's side because she had passed away when I come along. And my grandfather on my father's side I didn't meet because he had passed away. But other than that, I had the other grandparents, the other half. And we were loving with our grandparents. They just loved us and we loved them. We were very close. And I guess we just had a great family life. We had big family reunions every year. We'd put 2 hay wagons together, they'd cover them with sheets and cook up about 10, 15 chickens, have a hog roast, a pig roast with the apple in the mouth. Every year they had that in August. And they'd always do it on our farm because we had a lot of space on our front lawn. And we always had people that weren't our relatives be there as our relatives. So I say we had a good life.
Now, aside from the acts of prejudice that you've already mentioned, was there any violence that was directed towards you or your family during your childhood that you recall?
Not really. They would threaten, but they never would go after or do anything. I think they were more afraid because my father and my oldest brother, because my oldest brother was 13 years older than I was, they hunt a lot and they knew how to handle guns. And so if anything looked even funny, they were always afraid that they would get shot. And they tried stuff, but it never worked.
Now, did any of your older brothers serve during the war?
My oldest brother, he was in the Army. Yeah, he was in the 3 Cs. It was almost like a military group. And then he went into the Army when the war broke out in 41. And he didn't volunteer. They just automatically put him in because he was in the 3 Cs. So you're automatically in. But that's the only 2 of us went.
And do you remember where you were when you heard the news that Pearl Harbor had been attacked?
Do I remember when?
Where you were and when you
yeah, I was in the fields, and my father, we had the radio, and my father came home from work that night, and he says, the country is being bombed, or Hawaii was being bombed. And we, being 15, 16 years old, you're not thinking too much about it. I says, wow, that's bad. And we were a little bit terrified too because I was thinking, well, they're going to come over here too. But my father never taught us fear. He let us know to be strong and brave. But I do remember when it happened. And we were out in the field, and my father came home from work to talk about it.
And did the thought of you having to join the military cross your mind? Did that thought come into your head at all? That you'd have to go off to war?
Did I have to go where?
That you would have to go off to war?
Oh, I never thought about it at that time. Because I was only 15 or 16 years old when the war broke out. But then when they said I was going to be drafted, it was either my brother or me. My brother was supposed to go, but my father insisted it was me instead, because the farm wasn't big enough to hold us both. My brother is close to me. Because my father and I, we clashed a lot. And so he figured I was too stubborn. So I was somewhat picked to go into service. And I didn't want to be in the Navy because I couldn't swim and everything, but they put me in there anyway. I asked for the Air Corps. They said, here comes another sailor. And then they put me in the Sea Cooks and Stewards branch, and I didn't like that. I wanted to be in the Seabees. But it wasn't to be.
Didn't get the choice that you wanted there.
No, we took our training in Bainbridge, Maryland. The one thing that I had resented at that time is why an all-black company had a white CO. And so when I confronted him about it, I asked why, and he said, "Boys, just stay in line." And I said, "Boy, give me 50." So I gave him 50 push-ups. So when I got finished with him, I was still smart. I said, "Why, you want now? What do you want me to do? Give you 50 more?" Because I don't like being called boy. I'm in here to fight for the country. And he said, "Yeah, you can give me 50 more." And I says, "You know what? I can outdo you." And I could see he was getting mad because he was turning fire into red. And so, anyway, he said, "I doubt that." And I said, "Well, prove it." And he got down there with me. We did about 40, and he said, "You ain't had enough?" I said, "No, I'm ready to go. I'm ready. I'm just getting started." My brother and I used to do 200. So anyway, do you know what? He must have respected me for it, because he gave me a rank before I got out of the boot camp. And he shook my hand. He said, "Good luck, sailor." So I just couldn't understand why we couldn't have a black seal.
So did you? As you're being sent off to defend your country, but that same country that you live in, you've been treated so unfairly up to that point. Did you have any mixed feelings?
No, I stood proud. I did. I stood proud. I put my hand on my chest or gave a salute. I just stood straight and tall because I was so proud to be a part of this country. And no matter how I was treated, I was a very proud person. And I guess it ingrained in me that my father ingrained to us that you are a man, be a man. And I seemed to gain a lot of respect for that. My skipper and I were real tight, the Captain Snyder. He was one of the greatest guys in the world. Because he would protect me if the second officer didn't like me, because I wouldn't shine his shoes. in spit shine, because I had spit shine on all my shoes. My shoes looked like glass. And he wanted me to do his like that. And I said, I'll have them done, Mr. Holliday. And he said, no, I want you to do them. I said, I'll have them done. And I wouldn't disobey him. And he did everything to get me court-martialed. He couldn't become the skipper.
So it seems like you were always a little bit rebellious.
Very. Not a little bit. I'm very rebellious.
But not. What do I want to say? But in good reason.
Yeah, and I wasn't about to be vicious or violent. Right. I wouldn't be that way, but I always demanded respect because I'm going to give you respect.
Fair is fair.
Yeah.
So when I didn't ask you this before, but did you serve? You served in the Pacific, or?
Yeah, in the South Pacific and the Atlantic.
Okay.
So I had European and the Pacific.
And did you do the Pacific first, and then
yeah,
went to New York,
and then our ship. So we were in combat. We bombarded the Marshall Islands, Saipan, Rota, Tinian, and all those islands. We bombarded the ammunition dumps, and they would explode like fireworks for days. It was, how would I put it? You were out there, and I manned the 20 millimeter guns, and when we were out in the ocean, when the Japanese Zeros were coming at your ship and firing on your ship, you had to get them, or they would just commit hara-kiri by running their plane into your ship. So we had our guns trained on them all the time.
And what was your responsibility with the 20 millimeter?
On the 20 millimeter firing, I was the gunner. We only had 2 metal sheets here. In the middle was open. And when those bullets were coming, you didn't know if they were going to get you or not. But you had to get that plane before it got to the ship.
So you guys fought off enemy fighter planes?
Oh, yes.
You did. How many encounters would you say you had?
We had 3 that I remember.
And did you shoot any down?
Yeah, we got them all, because those 3, none of them got to our ship. And back then we didn't have, you had radar, but we could only see an image of other ships out there. And we also, the torpedoes coming at you, they knew they were coming, and all that you know, you had to maneuver the ship. So the skipper did a lot of maneuvering in and out, swerving.
Trying to evade.
To avoid them.
Did you guys encounter any enemy ships?
Not on the ships.
So the majority of the time that you were aboard ship, you were serving the officers.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, all the officers liked me, but some of them were just, they were dumb. They didn't know as much as I knew about what was going on, but yet I had to, yes, sir, and no, sir. I didn't like that, but I did it anyway.
Did you experience any prejudice aboard ship?
Yes. I had one fight, and I gave him a medical discharge because what it was, I was in the men's room washing and brushing my teeth, and so he came in and he says, he was from Texas, and he said, "Hey, nigger, get out of there and let a white man wash up." And I thought he was joking, so I took it as a joke. I says, no, I says, I don't move for anybody. And he took his foot and kicked me. And it just startled me because I didn't think so. So I turned around and started taking off my ditty bag that had all my equipment in it. And then by the time he busted me wide open, my eye wide open, but hitting him in the eye. And I lit into him. And if it hadn't been for a German doctor, our ship doctor, I probably would have killed him. Because I beat him so bad that they gave him a medical discharge. And Dr. Schaub came to my defense because he said he saw the whole thing start. And so they didn't court-martial me. But this Dr. Halliday, he wanted to court-martial me. That was the second officer.
Who taught you how to fight?
Just my brother and I, we would use canvas gloves. And because I was bigger than my brother, even though he was older, and he was strong as a mule, but we would hit each other in the stomach until to see who could take it the longest. So those are the things we did, and we'd box with just canvas gloves. I don't know, but yeah, we didn't hate each other. We just family feud. But we don't let anyone else bother us.
So did you get a little bit more respect after you sent that guy home?
After that, well, in fact, we boxed. We did a lot of boxing. No one wanted to box me after that.
Yeah. I don't blame them.
Because I was all bloody. I couldn't even go home on, we had a 7-day leave. I couldn't go home on leave because my eye was all busted.
So were you guys out to sea pretty frequently, or would you guys?
Yeah, we were on out to sea nearly all the time we were in the South Pacific. And then when we were in the Atlantic, we became a flagship, and we didn't transport them, we guarded the ships that had the troops on going to Europe, France, Italy, Africa, Corsica. We went to a lot of countries. Every 3 months we made a trip.
So can you take me through your first experience when enemy fighters came in and you guys had to defend your ship? And can you just kind of take me through that, what you experienced?
What the experience was? Well, all you do that you were going out there, you're either going to die or kill. You got to kill or be killed. That's the attitude you had to have. Kill or be killed. Now, you may think that you would leave you over the years, but it never leaves you. It's still in the back of your mind. An example of that was when we had our earthquake here in '71. I was out jogging with my dog, 6:10 in the morning, and the earthquake came. The transformers were exploding, the wires were clanging together on the poles, and it looked like fireworks. It felt like I was in combat again. And so it's an eerie feeling. And then I couldn't move from the spot, and so you're like you're almost frozen because you can't move while the earthquake is going. And my dogs were trying to protect me, but one of my youngest one, he took off and went home. I went to the house. But the older one, he stayed with me, leaned against my legs. Big white shepherds.
So it seems like you've been fighting your whole life.
Yeah, in a sense, yes. Even when I came to California, I finally went into business because I just joined the union, and they never would give me work. They'd give it to all the white boys. that were there. And but I still wanted me to pay my dues. So I finally went on and got my license and became a contractor. And I would go out to see people on the job by recommendations, and they'd make remarks like, "Oh, you didn't sound colored on the phone." And so I would confront them about that. I said, "Well, how am I supposed to sound? Just explain to me, because I don't know how I'm supposed to sound." Then they'd think about it. I'd get the job anyway at a high price. But even the Jewish people would say to me, "Oh, but you have no right." And I say, "Well, you came here, you changed your name from Brumstein to Brown, and you're okay. But I can change my name all I want, but I'm still colored." And I said, so don't tell me I don't have a right. And I had my biggest customer's wife is the one that did that to me, and he begged me to stay with him and keep doing his work. He was a retired contractor, but all his old clients he wanted me to do their work. So as I say, those are the things, some of the things that I had to go through. Even in Ohio, we went back to Ohio for 9 years to get my 2 young kids through high school and college, because I didn't like the system here in LA. And I wanted them in a country school like I came up in. I went out to look at a job, a big farm. They wanted all the buildings done. And I got there and the dog was barking. And she says, "I better put my dog about." I said, "Why did they bite?" She said, "Oh, no, he's never bitten anyone." Says, "He doesn't bite," but he's not used to colored people. And right then, a bulb lit in my head. And I won't call her name, but I said, "Mrs. So-and-so, don't worry about your dog. Let me get out." I said, I'll get out. I'm not going to sue you or anything." And I got out, I went over and talked to the dog, pet the dog, and everything. I said, "You know, your dog is colorblind." I got that job. And never did it. When I left, the white fellow that took over my business finally did it. And he said he made more money on that job than any job he ever did. He said, "But I can't get out of your shadow." In fact, just about 3 months ago, he and his wife came out to visit me. And he was an alcoholic when I met him, but he was a good painter. And he worked for me all the years I was there. And I told him when I left, it was his. He said I was more of a father to him than his own father, because he thought he was going to be an alcoholic. And I told him, I said, "Only if you want to be. You don't have to be." "Well, my dad is." I said, "That doesn't make you an alcoholic." And he always praises me for saving his life. And he finally got married. I had talked him into that. He wasn't going to get married. And they just love me.
So going back to your time in the Navy aboard the Suffrage, when did you receive training on the 20 millimeter guns?
Before, I received my training in Bainbridge, Maryland. And then after that was boot camp. Then we went to Vallejo, California on a troop train. Cattle train, we called it. And so that's when I came to California. Now they said I wanted to come back. So I finally came back in '54.
So your first encounter with Japanese fighters, was that while you guys were bombarding the islands?
Yes.
And they'd come out and try.
That's the only time. We were headed to Japan, and then our ship was condemned to combat because it was too old, they said. So that's when they sent us to the Pacific. Otherwise, we would have been gone to Japan.
And you mentioned the two steel plates on either side.
Yeah, there are metal plates here, the metal plate here.
How wide is that opening?
That was for if anyone firing at you, they had to get in between.
How wide is that opening?
This opening, it's maybe 4 inches. Just enough for you to see what's going on.
So you're looking through there, aiming.
Yeah.
Through that 4-inch opening.
But you could see, even at night, you could see where your shells were going because every 4 or 5 shells you had a tracer. So you could see where your shells were going.
And you had enemy fire
coming
hitting those steel plates.
And you had to go by sound where he was. But you guys, you got your target.
How do you stay focused while those bullets are coming in at you?
I don't think, you don't have fear. You're just there, and you don't think about dying. You could die, but you don't think about it. You just do what you're ordered to do.
Did you have any close calls?
No close calls. I mean, we had shells hitting all around us, but no close shells. We didn't even lose anybody on our ship.
That's what I was going to ask you next. And when did was it the kidney stones the reason why you were taken?
Yeah, they put me in St. Albans Hospital in New York. And because we tied up at Pier 92 in New York.
So did you start having issues while you were in the South Pacific?
Somewhat, because I had, what do they call them? It's not a herpes. When you get...
Hernia?
Huh?
A hernia?
No, not hernia. I know the name of it just as clear. You get them when you're nervous. I almost had it, but I'll think of it. But anyway, it's like almost something that just hurts. It goes all the way through your body. And I had that, and I think it was all the stress, and you're not realizing in my brain that I had stress. I was having stress, and that's what was happening. And then the kidney stones happened. So it's.
So how did you get to New York?
The ship went. We stopped at all these places. All right. Went through the Panama. We tied up in Panama for a couple of weeks. Then we went to Orange, Texas, and tied up there a couple of weeks. And we left there and went to Green Cove Springs, Florida, and tied up there. And then we went from there to Virginia. Then we went from Virginia to Maine, and we couldn't understand that. Came back to Boston, and then went back to New York to tie up, and that was for our base.
So this was after your ship had been condemned from combat?
After we left the South Pacific, we went to the Atlantic.
Got it.
But that's the way we went. Panama, Orange, Texas, Green Cove Springs, Florida, and then Virginia Beach. Then we went from there to Maine, and then back to Boston, and then to New York, where we tied up.
Then you ended up in the hospital.
That's where I went into the hospital.
And after you got out of the hospital, you were assigned to
a destroyer escort, because my ship was overseas at the time.
So you have a whole new crew, all new officers.
Yeah, I met all new officers. I hated that leave my first officer, because I remember the skipper of my first ship, because he was one of the nicest guys. But on the BFW Reed, I got close to the officers though, on the BFW Reed too. But it wasn't like the first ship.
Anything memorable from your time aboard that ship?
Well, yeah, we got to see a lot of countries, see a lot of girls.
Was your combat experiences over at that point, or did you guys?
No combat. We tried a lot of things to get dates and all, but no combat. It was just an experience that I'm happy I had it. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm happy I did it.
So did you spend the rest of your time aboard the BFW Reed until you were discharged?
Yes.
Okay. So after the war had ended and you guys were sailing around the world still?
Well, no, we were there even up until the end of the war. And then I was discharged in Tennessee, Nashville. But no, we were actually, when the war stopped in 1945, when the Germans gave up, that was great news that the war was over, and we were just patiently waiting to go home then.
So what did you do once you got home and you were discharged?
Well, I got married. First thing in all me, I got married about 3 months after I got home. There was experiences there. I came in, couldn't buy a farm, I couldn't buy a car or anything because I didn't have any credit. I said, so that's strange. My neighbors who were white, they were able to get new cars and loans from the government. I couldn't even get a loan from the government, through the government. It just, so many things that even when I tried to buy a 37-acre farm, and they wouldn't loan me money. I had money in a bank, and I took the money out and just kept it at home because they wouldn't loan me money. They could take my money and use it, but they wouldn't loan me money. And so it was just, I said, come back, and then we'd go into a restaurant and we couldn't sit at the counter, or else they wouldn't serve us. One place in a little city in Ohio, they had a hamburger stand. Everybody talked about their hamburgers and their steaks, how good they were. So we went down there and they wouldn't wait on us. So we got a whole bunch of servicemen and fill up the counter. And they didn't want to serve us. So finally they called the police, and the police came and said, well, we're not moving. We served the country, we're not moving. And the police backed off and says, you've got to serve them. So every one of us ordered steaks. And we waited until they got them on the grill, and they turned them over, and then we got up and walked out.
I was hoping you'd say that.
And got up and walked out. But he served people after that. But I would say these are the things that I couldn't understand, and even later, even when I moved to California in 1954, there were restaurants that would not serve us, or they'd let you sit there, ignore you. And one restaurant that I still go to today, I'd go anyway, and one waitress would wait on me all the time because she just thought I was a good person, a nice person, and she'd go out of the way to wait on me right away. Now that woman that was there, she was sharp all the time, the owner. And I don't know if she just knew about the prejudices or what, but she never ever said anything, but she always greeted me when she came in. And she always saw me there. She just died about 3 years ago. She was 97 or 8 or something like that. But her son, because that was back in '54, and her son, right today when I walk in there, now he's old now, but he'll see me and he'd come shake my hand and give me a big hug.
What restaurant is that?
That's in L.A. That's the Pan's, the restaurant.
Okay.
Pan's on La Tierra and La Cienega. And I still go in there today. And you know, they served good food. The food was great. But I was just determined to go because this is a restaurant where a lot of blacks didn't go because they said they don't want us in there. I said, I don't care if they don't want me. I'm just going. I don't want them. I just want their food.
That's the rebel in you.
Yeah, and well, you know, when George is right here in L.A., when Obama was running for president. Now George's restaurant, Island Atlantic, nicest guy in the world. He's Greek, and we were just always buddy. We'd tell jokes. He'd come and sit at my table when I'd go in there when he first opened, and when Obama was running for president, and he says, "Boy, look at that! That boy is doing good." I said, "Wait a minute, back up. Boy? Why is he a boy? Did you ever call another president boy?" I said, "That's a man." He said, "Oh, just a figure of speech." I said, "I'm just saying. Listen to yourself. Have you ever called another president boy?" And so we were kind of off kilter for about maybe 6 weeks or 7 weeks or so, but eventually we got back on because I really liked the guy, but he still is from that old school. If he's black, he's a boy, no matter how old he might be.
That's just another term to keep you
to keep you down. And I don't know. Like the first time this was said to me in Beverly Hills, I told you the contractor had retired and he wanted me to do his work because he liked my work. I was sitting in their house when this happened. We were drinking wine out of tall stem glasses, and in Beverly Hills, and they had a riot, and the blacks were rioting, and so she said, "It's a shame." I said, "Yeah, it's a shame we had to riot to get recognition." "Oh, but you people have no right." And I said, "Have no right?" And that's the one that I told, "You change your name from Brumstein to Brown." And that was the one I told. And I says, "And you tell me," I said, "you come here because you wanted to. My foreparents were brought here against their will." So I said, "So what do you mean I have no right? I was born here, and you have more privileges than I do." And so anyway, I slammed the table, the wine glass on the table, and I stood up. And so, and he always called me Wally. He said, "Wally, come here, come here." He said, "Come on." He says, "Don't pay attention to her." When they wanted to do their house, I said, "I will not do that house as long as that woman's in it." He sent her to Florida for 3 weeks. He wanted me to do his house. So I would say, I've been through a lot of experiences, and my young son even said to me, he said, "Pop, how do you come up with these answers?" I said, "Because I refuse to be put down or be looked down on. I'm a man. I deserve to be looked in the eye."
And your father and your parents instilled that.
Yes. My father whipped me the last time I was about 15. And he used to whip us a lot. And which was okay, because sometimes we deserved it. And this time he was wrong, and I was told him he was wrong. "Boy, don't talk back to me." I said, "But you're wrong." He hit me. No, he whipped me first, and I wouldn't cry. I stood there, and I mean, he whipped me bad. I mean, I had to carry scars into the Navy from that beating. And then when I wouldn't cry, and then he took his fist and knocked me down. I got up and I said, "You might as well knock me down again, because you're still wrong." And that's when he turned away and walked away. And he told me later years, he said, "I knew you'd become a man." I never got really big compliments from my father. Always got them from my mother. Until 1980, when I was moving back here from Ohio, because we went back for the 9 years. And I went kissed him on top of his head, and I says, "Pop, I'm going back to California." He said, "Wait a minute, son, I got to stand up. He never once put his arm around the boys. But he put his arm around my waist, and he says, "I got to tell you something, you've been a real son." And I stood there and cried. I said, "Pop, that's what I always wanted. You always told me I wouldn't amount to a dime. I wouldn't live to be 21. I was too stubborn." And he says, "Son, you ever realize I didn't want you to grow up like me?" And he found out I was just like him. And so as I said, I wish we could have had a chance to understand each other better. If he'd told me back then, in the beginning, why he was the way he was, we could have understood each other. But it's all good. And I was pretty strict on my own kids, my oldest boy especially.
How many children did you have?
I have 3. I was married twice. My first wife and I were too young in the first place. I was 20, she was 17. Pregnant, so we clashed because we talked at the same time. And because she was a good woman. But I was pretty bitter, but I got a divorce, and I got custody of my son. It was my son and I only for 9 years before I remarried. And he and I are like that today. He came here just the other night to play cards. My son would do anything for me. And he said, "I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for you, Dad." He said, "Because I've always been there to protect me when I was doing wrong." And he said, "All those friends that you didn't like that I had, they're either jail or dead." And he says, "And you kept me away from that."
So did you pass the same values that you received from your father
yes.
to your children?
Only I did it a little bit different, more diplomatic than my father, but then my son probably did things more diplomatic than I did, because we learn from our peers, and it's just that we don't know how to be a parent. We learn as we go.
And did you see your children going through and experiencing similar things?
They never had that much prejudice. They might hear a remark or something like that, but my children were on the honor roll, top students of their classes, And the kids loved him. My daughter was entered into the Hall of Fame in Ohio for her track and her basketball.
They were allowed to compete.
They were allowed to compete, but see, we weren't. But I say, and David, my son, was offered the position of president of the honor society or something. And he said, I don't want that. I'm not qualified for it. He said, the runner-up should get it. And so, but as I say, we never told the kids, you can't do this, you can't do that. If they wanted to do something we didn't like, we'd tell them, well, here are the pros and cons. Now you make the decision. And they always made the right decision because they never wanted to displease their parent. We would play, I had 2 acres, and we'd play football, basketball, baseball out in that field. It's we were real close, my 3 children and I.
So if you could describe or put into perspective how different the country is today compared to when you were growing up, how far we've come.
We've come a long way, but many times now you're segregated legally, and because they have, like, when in voting, they put districts out there. If you're in one district and that's mostly minority, they will put that as a separate district. So that vote won't count. And I think it's wrong. There's just so many things they're doing out there in the politics just to keep you down. And I say, my kids, I don't let anyone tell you can't. My daughter is a psychologist. I mean, she's majored in psychology, phys ed, and market management. She was the first black woman to be a supervisor of the United Telephone Company in the state of Ohio. And they were paying her 20% less than they paying the men and the other supervisors. And so she sued them and won the case. And they had to pay her retroactive. Because she stood up, she said, I'm like you, Daddy. So there's just so many things that the school where she was at teaching in Santa Monica, the guy hit her and she had to go to the hospital and everything, slammed the door on her and everything. And yet he's still there. They're begging her to come back now because she's suing the school too. And she was just suing him at first, and then she went after the school and everything. Now they're begging her to come back to work. So, but the thing of it is, they let him stay there, and he was using her office.
Crazy.
It just couldn't understand that after all, and they knew, all the witnesses and everything knew what went on, and they let him stay.
Well, after listening to your testimony, your experiences, I feel like if it wasn't for men and women like you who did rebel and who did stand up against injustice, change may not have taken place.
Oh, it does. It does. Of course, my children, I think my children don't realize any of that because they are able to say what they want to say to all their friends. Well, like most of my young children, most of their friends are white. They don't have many black friends because that's the world they came up in. Now, I came up in that world, and it was for a long time before I had a black girlfriend. because I didn't know anything else but the white world. But yet they were still prejudiced against me just because my skin was dark. So, there was just a lot of those things. They made me bitter to a certain degree, but I always refused to let it get me down.
Well, it's very admirable. I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to have that.
I say, yeah, you can't tell me I'm not this or not that. And if I could have, all right, I'll show you the check stub. $600 for about 4 months' pay. It was at the Ohio Telephone Company, because that's where I worked. I couldn't become a supervisor because even though they would pay me the money, but they wouldn't give me a job, and they said too many people would quit. And I quit. I worked for the Smith Agriculture Fertilizer Company. I went from the ground to the top, but they wouldn't give me the position. They said they can pay me the money, but they can't give me the position. I went to Chicago. I worked at it's an appliance company. I can't remember the name right now. But I was working in a parking garage first, parking cars when I first moved to Chicago in 1948. I didn't have a job, so I had to have something to have some money coming in right away. And they saw me at this place, and they thought that I would be good to work with their appliance company. So I said, well, maybe I'll think about it. So they offered me a good salary, so I said, okay, I'll come over and try it. So I go over there, and I'm able to, now I'm supposed to be in the background doing the books and stuff, but instead I'm on the floor selling. I was selling more than their top salespeople. And so it went on, and they had an appliance order out of Texas or someplace, and they were going to refuse it because they couldn't make, it says no, it costs too much money. And I showed them how they could do it and make money without even touching them. And so it would have direct shipping. And then I said, well, gee, you need me as a supervisor because your supervisor is dumb. I'm just teasing because he was a nice guy. And then they said, no, we can't give you that job and because you don't have a college degree. Because they said, we thought you had a college degree. So I quit and went back to the parking garage and with that big money that they offered me. But I quit, and they begged me to come back. I said, I don't want to come back to a place where I'm limited. So I practice what I preach.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your experience?
Oh, I had a honeymoon marriage. I could share that. For 54 years before she passed away, that was my second wife. We would go into a supermarket and we'd waltz all over the store. We'd sing harmony, and wherever we went, we would sing. We were just happy. It was just a beautiful life.
Any advice on how to keep a lasting marriage?
Yes, keep your wife happy, smile, make her laugh. If she's down, find her something to joke about. That's the way. Even my girlfriend, I just saw something the other day over here that she wrote about how I was always there for her. No matter how she was down, I always found something to lift her up. And this is the way I look at life. I mean, if you take care of your wife, you don't have time for all this outside stuff. That's what so many politicians are doing. And so many people are doing. They aren't politicians. All this outside stuff, you don't need it if you take care of home. And my family was first.
I like that. Now, aside from the marriage advice, do you have any, if you could offer any advice to my generation or future generations, just in general?
Yes. Listen, and you'll learn. Talk, you can't hear. So I said, listen to each other. We made a vow when we got married my second time was, when I am angry with you, let me speak my peace. When you're angry with me, I will let you speak your peace. And then we can discuss it. And if you do that, you'll never have an argument. We never had an argument. Our kids used to tease us, Mom and Dad, you guys never fight. I said, why do you want to fight? We're supposed to be in love. But that's all, that's the best advice I give. Listen.
I think it's great advice. And I want to thank you very much for sitting down and speaking with me. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.